Welcome to the Pathways to Profitability podcast, personal tales of business success. Are you feeling stuck improving your profitability? Learn from fractional business professionals how their services move your profitability needle. Here's your host, Cheryl Mucha, CEO of CFO Your Way.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Pathways to Profitability. I am excited to have this conversation today with Chris Spafford from Frabul. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Did I botch the name?
Well, it's a made-up name, so I guess there is no botching it. I pronounce it Frabul. Everyone else pronounces it Frabul. I don't know. Whatever you want to pronounce, it's fine.
Just don't call me late for dinner, right? So, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I like to just give the audience a brief overview of who you are and what you do, what your service offering is.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chris Spafford. My company is Frabul, which actually stands for Fractional Business Leadership. And I focus on business development for small and medium-sized companies. So really focused on sales infrastructure, which is strategy, process, organization, analytics. And I also get into the marketing aspect because the two are tied so closely together. Oftentimes, and given my background, it's easy for me to jump in and identify gaps in the entire ecosystem and help companies overcome those.
So when a potential client comes to you, what is their immediate pain point or their immediate reason for having a conversation with you?
That's a great question. There's really two different audiences, right? So there's one audience where the company is probably newer, growing really fast, and the founder recognizes that without building a good foundation under the various operational units in the business, sales and marketing being one of those, the growth probably won't last. It'll falter at some point, and they don't have time to do it themselves or don't have the knowledge to do it themselves. So that's one situation. The other situation is with a business that's founded by someone that has a great skill and has developed a product or a service, and the business has grown, but all of a sudden it begins to flatline or move backwards. And they really don't understand what the problem is. Oftentimes it's, hey, if I just add some more salespeople, everything will get better. And the reality is it's not the truth, right? Because if you don't have a good foundation and your sales team isn't being effective, then adding more salespeople will not give you the return on investment that you expect. So that their pain point is just not having enough revenue growth. The other pain point is fine with revenue growth, just no foundation to build on.
And I love that you use the word foundation because I use that word all the time. Business owners need to realize that foundation and that investment in their foundation is what's going to set them up for long-term success.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you 100%. It's like the foundation of a house, right? If you build a house with a weak foundation, it's just going to fall down.
Right. And the other thing I just wanted to kind of hone in a little bit on is you mentioned, the mindset is sales are not where we need them to be, add more salespeople. Instead of looking at it as a process improvement or maybe the wrong people or, there's some other issue internally that the sales team is not being as productive as they can be, and by just adding more, you're kind of you're adding to the issue because you're decreasing your profitability by taking on more people and more salaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the bottom line, right? It's all about profitability. It's all about earnings growth. A lot of business owners are concerned about enterprise value, growing enterprise value for whatever reason, and just adding more full-time employees, not always a great way to do it. So really the start for me is just to go through an assessment, identify where the gaps are, the gaps between where a company is today and best practice in the industry. So, on the strategy side, one of the key issues that I typically uncover is a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses, they haven't identified their unique value proposition. And many times they can go through and they look at the business, but they can't see the forest through the trees. As an outsider, me coming in, just going through a set of questions to identify what has propelled them to this point so far, oftentimes I can identify their unique value proposition, help them build it into one or two really concise sentences. And that's going to be their differentiator in the marketplace, right? So from a strategic initiative, that's really the first step for most companies.
Right. And I'm smirking here because as a fractional, we both live in this fractional world, right?
Yeah.
We bring such a vast array of knowledge and experience to our clients, whereas an internal person, whether the business owner or sales manager, or in my case, the internal CFO, they're siloed. They only see what's going on within that organization. And again, they don't see the forest through the trees.
It's true. And, a lot of times these smaller businesses might be family businesses where
Right.
this is the only business the owner's ever been in. They've never experienced anything different, or if they have, it's been for a very short duration. So I agree with you. I mean, I haven't worked for a ton of different companies, 3 or 4 throughout my career. But I do have over 30 years experience leading sales and marketing teams in a lot of different channels. So I probably look at things in a different perspective than they're looking at them, and at least can put new things on the table for them to consider, right? Make good recommendations.
Right. And to talk to the point of family-owned business, second generation, they get caught in this rut of, this is how we've always done it, right? I'm sure you hear that all the time, as do I.
Yeah.
This is how we've always done it, and it's worked for all these years, right? Well, maybe it's not working anymore, and we need to make some changes to be more productive. There's tools out there. There's so many different ways to do the same thing in a more efficient and more profitable way.
Tools is probably the big one, right? So these business owners, they wear a lot of different hats, and they're going 9 million miles an hour all the time. They don't have the time to dedicate to learning about all of the new sales enablement tools, the marketing enablement tools that are out there, particularly with the advent of AI. There's so much popping up every day. And it benefits smaller companies the most because they're always bandwidth constrained. They don't have the amount of people necessary to do what they should be doing. So using the tools is a great way to do it. So I'm pretty active in keeping up to speed on a lot of the new sales tools that are available, particularly when it comes to efficiency. And CRM's not new, but you'd be amazed at how many companies still are not using a CRM program with marketing automation built into it. That's probably the biggest challenge I see today.
I agree. Yeah. CRM has been along for a really long time, but it's so powerful now, and in many different ways.
It is, and the thing that's confusing is there's so many choices.
Right.
The marketplace is filled with, there's probably over 100 CRM programs available. Some are niched down into certain areas. Some are more general. But what I find is oftentimes these systems that have been created internally are homegrown systems, if they have a system. And they're lacking in some of the things that you'd want today, such as being able to nurture your current customers, being able to nurture prospects, bringing them through a proper sales funnel and identifying what your close rate's going to be at every stage in that sales funnel to help with your forecasting. I mean, these are all things that are oftentimes foreign to business owners. Who may not be forecasting their business at all. It might just be, hey, at the end of the year, let's check our bank account, and if we have money in it, it's been a good year.
I hear it all the time. Again, that's why I'm laughing. And, this is our world, the numbers world, right? Numbers don't lie. No, and if you're not looking at them, you're not knowing what's going on in the story.
So it's interesting to me. I mean, finance has always been a huge part, obviously, in the sales world, right?
Right.
Because as a fractional CFO, you're telling a story. You're looking at a P&L and a balance sheet, and you're basically telling the owner a story of what's happening in their business. Uh, I'm going to turn it around for a minute and ask you a question. What
Uh-oh.
do you, yeah, yeah. What are you seeing in terms of companies' financials as it's related to sales and marketing and the tracking of their return on investment in some of the areas where they're spending money, but maybe not seeing a return, or maybe they are seeing a return? I'm just curious what you're seeing out in the market.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and so many directions I can go in here, but so many business owners um, just don't track to that level of detail. And when we come in and they have us go through that exercise, it really opens their eyes to what's driving their profits. So, so many of our clients have multiple lines of revenue. It's not just a single source. And they say, yeah, I'm profitable overall, right? My P&L is strong. And when you break it down and see the different sources, there could be one or two that are really dragging that profitability down. And then once we have that discussion, then it's a deeper dive and relating it to where to concentrate the sales effort. What our target should be. And that's where your expertise comes in.
And that's so great explanation. That's a huge help to me, because oftentimes the business owner doesn't know, right? So if they,
Right.
and many times they may have a controller, or they may have someone who is the executive assistant for the business doing the books, who doesn't
Mhm.
have the same level of insight someone with your experience is going to have.
Right.
And so to get that is huge. And I think from a dollar perspective, I think 10 million plus, just based on what I've seen, is probably a good size to start thinking about bringing in a fractional CFO. They wouldn't be able to afford a full-time CFO, but to bring in
Right.
a fractional to explain these things, super helpful. And for me, it's good cross-pollination, because I'm
Absolutely.
looking at the numbers in one way. I'm looking at the revenue side of it, right? Sometimes the profitability side, if I get access to those numbers.
Mhm.
Um, but the CFO is looking at a much bigger picture, so you can
Right.
give a much broader perspective.
I love it. And this kind of leads to like the reason why we're here, like creating pathways to profitability for our clients. So just
Mhm.
give us a little scenario of you're working with a client for, a couple months and things are changing within the organization based on your expertise and whatever. What is the effect on the client, I guess, both internally, people wise, and their sales efforts and sales results?
Yeah, so really depends on the customer, right? So if it's a company that doesn't even have a salesperson, what I'll do is I'll go through and help them build their infrastructure, hire a salesperson, bring that salesperson in. And if the business owner doesn't want to take the responsibility for managing that individual, I can manage that individual on a fractional basis. So building the infrastructure takes roughly 2.5 to 3 months just to get all the pieces in place. It's taken about 3 months to hire a salesperson these days as well.
Right.
But once you get that salesperson in place, uh, then what I'm doing is really working with that individual as any sales leader would. I'm breaking down the barriers that keep them from being successful, right? So ultimately, the goal is to meet plan, whatever that forecast is, and we're forecasting growth. And I'll stay on until the company reaches a point of profitability where they can afford a full-time sales leader that's appropriately experienced for where that business is in their business evolution, right? Because I'm technically I'm overqualified for that role, but on a fractional basis, I can do a lot in a short period of time and make the work effective.
Right. And now you've put all this effort in with, the existing sales team. They pull in a higher level sales manager, we'll call. In order to continue on that path, they need to be educated by you as to the whys and hows of the infrastructure that you've implemented and you've put in place.
Yeah, so there would be a period of handoff, basically,
Right.
where I run them through all the things I've done. And look, sales managers, particularly experienced sales managers, they may have different ideas
Right.
about the way things should be done, and that's perfectly fine, because ultimately there's lots of different ways to skin the cat. I do what's worked best for me, and if we're seeing success in the business, I don't know why you'd want to change it. Some people might want to. Doesn't matter, as long as what's the foundational elements stay intact, and you still continue to populate CRM, populate the data with good data, so you can benefit from the output, which
And
is
look
really
at that output, right?
look at the output. Yeah, I mean that's key. Stay on the sales strategy that we put together. I think that it's a good model. It works well, because ultimately my goal is to work myself out of a job. I want them to be that successful that they can bring in a full-time sales leader, and I move on to the next thing, whatever that is.
Right.
And if it's a sales team, so I also work with larger companies that already have an existing sales team, and they could have a sales leader, and the sales leader is maybe young in their evolution as a leader. Maybe they just transitioned from salesperson to sales leader, and they need some coaching and guidance, and the owner either doesn't have time for it or doesn't really feel that they're an expert in that area. Then I'll come in and help with the sales meetings, one-on-one coaching with the sales leader, things of that nature. So basically, I'm there as a resource for whatever needs a business has when they're trying to grow on the sales and marketing side of the table.
Right. So again, very much like me in the fractional world, you customize and tweak your services to be the most productive and resourceful for each client that you encounter.
Absolutely. Because even though the major elements are the same, every customer, every client, regardless of the industry, they may have some unique needs that are specific to them, and you need to build that into the equation. So yeah, it's that's actually what's exciting, right? I love change. I'm one of those purple unicorns that really enjoy change, and this fractional work is great for me because I get to experience a lot of different types of businesses. And here's what's amazing to me, because I've been doing this a little over 2 years now, and even though the industries are different, a lot of the time the challenges are the same. So what I'm working through with one company often has application at another company, right? It's been amazing the way that's worked out, because in these areas, the challenges wind up being similar in a different market, and having recently gone through it with other accounts, it's easy to tell that sales story. It's like, I think people relate well to real life experiences versus, well, the textbook says this, right? So having the ability to go in and say, I'm working with another client. They just went through a very similar thing. Here's what we did to resolve it, and this was the output. What do you think about that? Does that sound like something that we could undertake here? And oftentimes, well, yeah, if you've done it and it works, why not? Let's do it.
Right. And back to our comment earlier about, our experience and our, the vast situations that we are in. I say it all the time. I bring the experience of each client to every client, right? We're not in that silo in one organization. We're seeing so many different situations, so many different resolutions. Whether they work or they don't work, you still learn from that experience. and you're not going to repeat the ones that don't work.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I tell business owners all the time, what I do is not magic.
Right.
You could do it. It's not rocket science. The thing that I bring to the table is 30 years of various failures. So I've learned from the mistakes I've made. So if you've got the time and you're willing to make the mistakes, absolutely have at it. You can do it yourself. I save time. I bring
And
you to
money in the
the
long run, right? Because you're going to get there quicker.
Of course, and that's the thing. What you're doing is you're bringing someone in with that level of experience,
Right,
to save you the pain of making the same mistakes that individual has already made. It's just the way it is.
simple, right? So just real quickly, I wanted to just touch on, so you've been in business for 2 years as a fractional. Have you seen the acceptance of the fractional model change in business owners? So I see that it's more accepted, more known. You don't get that, like, I've never heard of this before kind of thing anymore. Have you seen that in your interaction with clients and potential clients?
I have, but not so much in the sales arena, more in finance, operations, and marketing.
Okay.
I think it's been around longer. So even though businesses are aware of the fractional concept and what it means, a lot of times I hear, I didn't realize that anyone was doing fractional sales leadership. So I think in general, with COVID, the silver lining on the COVID cloud is that fractional work became front and center just because of what people had to do, right? And now it's more commonplace. And I believe that more companies see the benefits in going that route if they're budget constrained.
Right. Yeah, bring in the expert at a lower cost. It's that simple.
It is, and there's a number of different business models that support fractionals in different ways. So look at the private equity model as an example. So private equity, they're going out, they're buying companies.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, they're buying companies that don't necessarily have a strong management team, or they want to build their own. It takes time, right? So time for private equity is money, because their typical horizon's 3 to 5 years, right, to build it and resell it. Right. So in that 3 to 5 years, what are you going to do? Well, if you look for a sales leader, typical search time for a sales leader is going to be 3 to 6 months. You're going to lose 3 to 6 months of building your foundation
and starting on that growth trajectory.
Exactly. So to bring in a fractional, to develop the infrastructure, build the team,
right,
creates a ready-made situation for the sales leader when they come in to just hit the ground running and begin on that growth curve. Same holds true for fractional marketing executives, fractional operational executives. Anytime where there's going to be a gap in a time-limited exit, you want to hit the ground running as fast as you can. So that's an interesting model. The other interesting model is with business owners who are looking at exiting the business. And when I say exit, it doesn't necessarily mean sell, right? So I spent a lot of time with exit planners. I'm not a certified exit planner, but I understand the whole concept. And it's about building your business to a point where it's operating at its peak all the time. And you enter that do loop, which, every day you wake up and you say, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? Because you have that choice. And for companies that want to optimize their business value and stay at that point, it's a good time to explore options in various sectors, whether it's finance, whether it's sales, marketing, operations. Tune up the business so it's operating at its peak, because there's some huge percentage of businesses that wind up having to sell unintentionally because of death, divorce, disagreement. I think there's one other D, I forget what it is, but Unfortunate set of circumstances. And if you're not positioned well,
You're leaving money on the table.
yeah, I mean, it's just not going to sell. It'll just fold up and go away.
Right.
I mean, do you get involved with companies who are planning for eventual exit to help them fine tune their books on a financial level?
On occasion, yes. And again, it's the that runway that you need, right? Don't come to either one of us if you want the exit to happen within the next year, because that's just not enough time.
Right.
Yeah, so business owners need to understand, and again, it's that forward thinking, right? That planning, that the expectation, and putting the things in place early so that you're set, you're good when you're ready to pull the trigger.
Yeah. So those are interesting asides from companies that just want to grow. Why you'd want to consider fractional support. And again, not just for sales, for a variety of different functions.
Right. The fractional model is becoming more and more accepted and populated, right? There's more fractionals out there now than there ever were. And I'm sure it's going to continue to grow as the year progresses.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I think it's going to continue to grow. And I think the model might change a little bit. So right now, for most fractional people I talk to, they're spending a day a week if they're in that full-time fractional role with a business.
Right.
I see that growing. So I see companies really liking what they're getting, wanting more of it, but still not wanting to pay for someone full-time on staff. So they can shave a little bit by maybe getting an extra half a day to another full day out of an individual. But I think it's super important to have that continuity as well, particularly if you've got customer issues, you've got salespeople issues.
Right.
You want to have an individual who understands all those and doesn't have to be retaught. So you can do it on a handoff, of course, but the further you get into it, the longer term you're there, just the more valuable you become.
Right.
But like a lot of fractionals, they don't want to go back to the corporate world. They enjoy the ability to see change, work on their own schedule. It's a different way of working.
Right. And do the things that we love to do.
Yeah. Work on the weekends. Work on
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for this time. Lots of great tidbits, and hopefully raise a lot of questions in business owners' minds, and they'll be able to reach out to you. Your contact information is here, and it will be in the recording notes. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just explain one thing, because I see my email address is my Sales Acceleration email address. So my company name is Frabul. I am a Sales Acceleration advisor, and Sales Acceleration is the largest network of fractional VP of sales in the country. So I do that, but I also have a couple of other things in my company that are outside of what Sales Acceleration does. So fractional marketing leadership is something I get involved with in smaller businesses, and training. So I do sales training for larger groups of salespeople, 10 or more, on business development, negotiation, things like that. So just a clarification on the email address, didn't want to cause any confusion, but thank you so much for having me on. I've watched these series, Pathway to Profitability. I think they're fantastic.
Thank you.
And you do a great job putting it together. I have to say, I've been on a lot of podcasts, but this is one of the best prepared for podcasts I've ever been on. Fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And just to go back to what you said with the Sales Acceleration, you have more tools in your toolbox than typical fractional sales.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of things they bring to the table. Yep.
Great. So thank you so much, Chris. Thank you to our audience for tuning in to Pathways to Profitability. Here's the website, pathwaystoprofitability.com, to see not only this episode, but all our prior episodes. Thank you so much and have a beautiful day.
That's it for today's episode of Pathways to Profitability. Remember to ask yourself, where can I pay my success forward today?